This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources parents, families, and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Thank you for joining us on Season 3 of Candid Conversations. We are so excited to be starting this season, and we're super excited about our guest this week. We have Dr. Caroline Leaf, who you've probably heard us talk about a lot on this show.
We plug it a lot.
We really admire the work that you do.
Thank
You do a
you.
lot of work with neuroscience, neuropsychology, a lot of mindfulness really is a big part, and very fascinating research that you've done. I use it a lot with my clients, and so it's
Wonderful.
a great opportunity to have you on here and share your
you.
knowledge with some of our listeners as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, I know one of the things that it was just interesting how it worked. I mean, this morning in the keynote, you were talking about just the fact that we have such egocentric, individualistic society,
Yeah.
and that's a cause of a lot of our problems. And I'd like to spend some time talking about that, if that's okay today, of just
Absolutely.
talking about, I always tell people that we have a loneliness epidemic, and we look at statistics and we can point it to heart disease or cardiovascular disease or, suicides or opioids. And there's much more depth to what's just shown on paper.
Absolutely.
So what do you see as you're doing research and kind of working with, your doctors and the different clinical trials that you're doing? What are we seeing as far as this epidemic of isolation and loneliness?
Well, I'm so glad that we're discussing this because it is a key issue. A lot of the Western countries have become so individualized and as opposed to community focused. So we've moved away from what's very natural for humans, which is deep, meaningful connection.
Right.
And it's not just the surface stuff. It is the real, like the village, the concept of the whole family involved, the things we see still in places like Italy and Japan and Cambodia, as I spoke about in the keynotes this morning. And it's just, there's a lot of research showing now that isolation kills as much as cardiovascular disease. So it's up there when we talk about cardiovascular disease being the main thing that kills people. So if you look at annual statistics, it's one of the main things that kills people annually. But we see that isolation superseding that, and we see that actually isolation is one of the main causes of cardiovascular disease. In fact, your whole body goes into pretty much low-grade inflammation, which then sets you up, increases your vulnerability for illness between 75 to 98% when you're lonely.
Wow.
So loneliness, the way I define loneliness, is it's a lack of love per se.
Yeah.
I mean, we say love, we always think of the sort of smushy stuff, but it's not the smushy stuff. That's just one component. Love is pretty much interacting with each other, living as the community. In Japan, when someone joins a firm, it's a lifelong commitment. They don't just go from job to job because you're part of the family. It's that when you've got a child, it's the whole family that's raising the child. It's that community aspect where we are working for the good of community. And that's been very lost in the United States.
Yeah.
Our youth are the loneliest. So love is very much we're designed to be consumed by love. So if you look at the neuroscience, and I spoke about this today, if you look at the wiring of the brain and you look at the cells, right down to the individual cells, we don't have anything in us. We don't have circuits or wiring for loneliness or for fear or for anger or anxiety, and all those pretty much fall under the opposite of love. So if I'm frustrated or irritated or angry, or there's an element of love missing. So love's very broad in its definition, and a lack of love leads to isolation. So if I'm angry, I'm pushing someone away. If I'm irritated, I'm pushing someone away. So instead of just pretending it doesn't exist or just suppressing that irritation, when we embrace that irritation or that anger or those feelings, those emotional warning signals, we can then start seeing, what is lacking. Maybe there is a level of something going on in my life, and a key component of most of what people are going through has got a component of not enough connection in it.
Well,
So I don't know if that
I'm
kind of
struck
explains.
by how many people I interact with where in the midst of a distress or feeling sad or depressed or any of those things, one of their go-tos is more often than not isolating themselves.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that that's literally the opposite of what we should be doing in those
the
moments.
opposite.
Well, I think it's how our society has set this up, though, that if you are struggling or something's going on, it's shame producing. You should isolate because you're not perfect or working. You have to have it all together. And I think we're in a society you don't belong. Yeah, and I think a society that is so built on outside perceptions. If something's going on, how many pastors have taken their life in the last year? How many leaders have fallen from grace because of choices that they've made? And they've never, they've isolated themselves to the point where,
top celebrities that are committing suicide, people that run with the suicide rate. You and I've had many discussions about this, about the increased suicide rates, and that it's a recognition that we can't do this. We can't do this anymore. We have to change. We have to come back to community. We have to start recognizing the need for the value of connection.
Right.
And that seems to have been lost. We definitely have hit a point in society where a leader's got to be perfect. It's like it's not okay to say I'm sad or depressed or angry or frustrated or I'm not coping or you've got to just pretend everything's fine. And you get on you see these leaders get out there and everything seems fine, but they're broken. And I go around the world working with leaders of all, whether it's churches, organizations, and what strikes me in the churches a lot is the big front that's put on with the pastors and their wives. But when I talk to them in the green rooms, these are broken marriages, broken people that are pretending everything's okay, and then almost shaming other people for, word of faith. Why are you feeling depressed? Stick a Band-Aid on the wound kind of thing. Use scripture as a Band-Aid and God as a genie. And that's creating such a problem in the church. So I don't know if you're seeing this in counseling. What we're seeing a lot in terms, because I don't directly work with people anymore, it's all through communication. So we're seeing thousands of comments coming through on our social media and emails being sent of people saying, I believe in God, or I'm doing mindfulness meditation, or I'm doing all that, but I'm still so broken and ashamed and guilty, and they don't want to talk to people about it, and that's creating loneliness. Instead of saying, okay, it's okay to be we'll send an email back saying it's okay to be ashamed, it's okay to be guilty. Use that as a springboard and connect with someone and start working through that.
We always one of our favorite authors is Dr. Irving Gollum. He's an existential psychiatrist out of Stanford. He's 89, 90 years old now.
He's up there.
But he always talks about in his books, he goes, it's okay to have a paid friend. It's, and that's what he sees therapy as, is finding somebody that can listen.
That'll listen to
like you talked about today, noticing and listening and just trying to help us figure out a collaborative solution. And I see it so much where, I can't tell you how many phone calls we get coming into Mayfield where people have been damaged by other forms of counseling or have been damaged by faith groups where it's that Band-Aid. I show this video all the time in my talks, the Bob Newhart, Stop It.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like when we try to put a Band-Aid on it or say you don't have enough faith or you try the scripture, it'll work. It's like telling people just to stop it. Like the list you said at the end was fantastic of it's okay to cry and it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to work through these things. But it's just amazing how as a society, I'm seeing some of these grassroots movements changing this. But still, if you look at the way we take care of our elderly, right?
It's isolation.
It's isolation, and they're
drag them.
Yep, and they're dying quicker and sooner. And I remember traveling overseas and just loving, and it's changing in some of the Western cultures even now. But like Italy and England, where you had generational homes, and
exactly,
grandparents were in a wing, and that's the way you have your house. Your
parents' my house is very much that way. Of the grandparents are esteemed. They work. They work with the family, not necessarily in a job. They have projects that we do, and that's so instrumental. One thing that you mentioned, Mark, that I think is really invaluable is that relationship piece of counseling.
Yes.
And so many studies have come out that show that that's one of the most impactful parts of therapy is just having someone to feel connected to, a place where you belong, a place where you're heard. And not a lot judged. Of what you're sharing sounds very much the same of a place to belong is something that we need.
Right.
We need to be investing the dollars in retraining community and reinvesting community. We've got we work with a church in Bremerton, and they've actually they raised millions and they built a community center. And it's a community center where it's centered around a basketball court. So it's used for professional basketball players. So that keeps the financial side.
Yeah.
But it's filled with classrooms, and it turns into a church on Sundays,
Oh,
and they
that's
use it for
fantastic.
weddings. But the kids are from the community. It's a very poor community. So the kids from the communities are coming in there, and they are using it as it's a place of safety. And I have a concept I set up in South Africa that's very simple. It's kind of based on the Zimbabwean background that I come from as well, bench therapy. And so we've got to put a bench outside the church, and it's when anyone sits on that bench, they know that they can be listened to, they can say anything, or they can listen to someone. So you're doing one of the two, and it's being used. These kids are coming from the community. When they need a talk, they go sit on the bench.
Yes.
So it's become symbolic of a place of safety for sharing.
Yep.
And that concept, the friendship bench, I mean, there's New York, there's areas where they've got people that just go and put benches up and just say, come talk.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's
right.
around the world now and people are responding, and this is where the money should be going.
Right.
Yeah.
Getting people, because those aren't qualified and trained people. You don't have to. You got to. What you can have is maybe like you guys that are trained and to have maybe a network of 1,000 or 2,000 people that you can spend a few hours just giving a few techniques and a little bit of guidance on what to say and listen. But we can very easily reach the need so quickly. Think of universities.
Right.
I mean, universities are, these kids, the millennials, these kids are university today is a whole different ballgame with the financial constraints, with the way that these kids are drugged, they're not being allowed to process. It's very different to how it was even 10 years ago, even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
These kids, the suicide rate's up, as we all know. They're not being valued for who they are. They're under so much pressure. They don't know how to process their life.
They said that extreme stress is like 1 in 4 college students now say they have extreme stress.
Exactly, 1 in 4, but it's actually higher. They literally are all battling.
Yeah.
Well,
There's no outlet. They're not
Right.
being encouraged. The outlet. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
good.
The outlet is they've got to go and get a mental health diagnosis and get on drugs.
Right.
That is the treatment. They're just
Yeah.
being told you've got to get a diagnosis and you've got to go on drugs. So
Right.
they don't know what other message.
Totally.
Meanwhile, if we had benches all around the university and the grannies and the people in the community saying, "Hey, come talk to me," it would transform society.
Well, isn't it? I mean, there's research out there putting a daycare in a retirement home increases life expectancy.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it's
'Cause
that.
get the grannies out there helping the
Right.
kids.
Yep.
Get the grannies out of, instead of drugging them with antipsychotics, which they do in the old age homes.
Yeah.
Get them into the community. Get them into the schools. Get them.
Right.
There's a few places where we actually got a successful program going in Dallas, whether it's still going now because I'm not at the school anymore. But we actually got all the grandparents coming into the classroom, facilitating the reading sessions, helping with after school, because they were just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So we got the community into the community.
Yeah.
It was transformational.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And such simple techniques and such simple solutions, but we've been trained to medicalize everything. And it's all got to be professionals, and it's all got to be around, complex techniques and things. Meanwhile.
So I think 2 questions out of that. One is, why do you think we've gone that way? I know we talk about the last 60 years, the medical model has really just usurped everything.
It has.
So I think the one question there is why, and then I'd love to have you talk through just that, the story of the cow.
Oh yes,
Because
I love that
Because
story.
I think the three steps, I think our listeners would be really apt to practice themselves. So
Absolutely. Well, essentially, around 60 years ago, the biomedical model became very dominant. And what that means is there was this shift from looking at the whole person and their story, their narrative, their life, their mind, their perception, how they saw things, their experience, the environment, all that stuff. And the I factor involved in that is how they experienced that was pushed aside because you couldn't measure it. We started moving to very evidence-based medicine, and there's nothing wrong with evidence-based medicine if it's done correctly. But everything became about numbers and about the physical, and if you couldn't measure it, then it was not.
and that's hard to do with the mind.
Well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't. Yes. So what happened was that unless it was an RCT, a random controlled trial, and that had statistics attached, it wasn't considered evidence-based treatment. So anything there where you just sat down and with your patients, I don't even want to call them patients, but you sat down with humans that are battling, which is all of us, and you listen to their story, and there's no one size fits all. which is also why I have a beef for CBT, because you've got your little program and you've got to plonk someone in, like schedule little test. Blah, blah.
For my listeners, that's why I like you. I do not like CBT at all, and
it's not even science. It's been scientifically shown to be a disaster.
I have students in my class that I share my opinion, and they get all mad at me because it's the easiest one to join. I'm like,
well, it's just like you can give them a drug, you can give them there's just no individualization involved in it. It's a little. Yeah, it's an activity, and also it's not even looking at the real reason. It's basically saying you are thinking wrong. So it makes you more isolated. It isolates you. So anything that diagnoses you and labels you, which is what this has happened for 60 years, anything that says it's in your brain, you're broken. Already you've devalued the person.
Yes.
So you're a broken machine. That's what started happening 60 years ago. Your story was thrown out. I don't want to hear your story. I'm just going to look at your symptom. All I'm interested, so like if you have a heart attack, there's symptoms. We can treat them. So they're trying to lump the body, which is the 1% part of us. They're trying to use that model for the mind. Now we know we cannot do that, but if you do that, you will pay the price. Right. So does this make sense? They've taken a law, a philosophy, an approach that works for medicine perfectly, and they've taken that into the realm of mind. It doesn't work for mind. Mind needs another way of approaching. Mind needs a very qualitative, interactive, and you can still get evidence-based statistics. I've just done clinical trials where we've done well-being, thinking, self-regulation, narrative, all of that. We are doing quantitative analyses, and we're doing blood measures, brain measures, so we can get some quantitative. But the qualitative is more informational, a survivor's experience. Every single person that comes through your hands in your counseling practice is an individual study on their own. We need to learn from them as much as and that's been taken away. That was shifted because they can't measure it, because it can't be standardized like CBT, where you've got your table and you've got your, it's
not numbers,
and you've got to fill in this little questionnaire before, and then you do this 10 times, and if you're not working after 10 sessions, well, what's wrong with you? It's all about take that thought. Don't worry about where it comes from. Just fix the thought. It doesn't work like that. The thought is telling you a story. The thought has got a whole history. That history needs to be unpacked.
That's why in our practice we love doing narrative therapy. We do a lot of EMDR therapy because it's helping unlock parts of that. When any time trauma happens, the brain wires differently just to protect itself. And how do we unlock that? And it's through story, and it's through reworking the story.
I love that you do that, and that's why we're working together. That's why you're on our team, and we're going to do research together, because you're approaching it in the way that you're treating humans like humans. You're dehumanizing. We've dehumanized people. We've turned them into robots that are pre-programmed, and what we're trying to do is just fix a broken program, and you can't do that.
No.
And then they're drugging it, which is making it worse.
Well, numbs the mind.
Numbs the mind, creates illnesses, iatrogenic. So when people, the drugs wear off, then the pain is still there, but now you've also got the damage in the brain, and that causes side effects. And then people are told that their illnesses got worse. They didn't have an illness in the first place. They're humans in life, experiencing what everyone else is experiencing, including the doctor who drugged them.
I'm so struck by how simple a lot of what you talk about is. It's very complex science, and we're discovering things, and there's processes, and it's founded. But ultimately, a lot of what I hear from you is going back to this basics of relationship, of thinking, being present. And it's so simple, but it's hard.
Simple. It's simple, but it's hard to go and work through your stuff. People, it's it's true. It's simple and it's complex. The simplicity is it's all about relationship. It's all about supporting each other, helping each other, and it's also the recognition that there's no quick fix. Technology and medicine. I'm sick. Give me a pill. Quick fix technology. Everything's quick fix. People want fast, quick. Mind is not fast and quick. You're going to spend your whole life working out your whole life. And as soon as people accept that, they can start being happier in their life.
You almost see a deep breath when I see clients, only about 8 to 10 a week now, but when I see them, I always tell them it's taking you this long to get here. It's going to take some time to undo it, and that's okay. This is a journey. Because clients come in and go, so okay, doc, like how many sessions do you think I need? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you that. So let's unravel your story and figure this out.
So it's the rest of your life. You don't need me the rest of your life. You're going to work the rest of your life.
And that really does not fit well in a medical model.
No, it doesn't. No. Because if it's all about money, then we're shortchanging ourselves. And I'm like, no, it's all about the healing. It's all about the freedom. It's all about the processing
journey.
That's why I
on the
would
journey.
train, when I was still practicing, I would train as soon as the time was appropriate. I'm sure you do this too. I would bring in caregivers, so either the parents, families, so someone, and train up a support team, even if it was in the church, to work with that
Right.
person so that they could become independent. So I always put a time limit on intervention. I'd work in
Which is
cycles of
great,
21 days. And after 63 days, we would reduce down, so maximum 63 sessions. And normally it was 21 sessions. And then after that, only at the absolute exception, depending on what, if you were dealing with a learning disability, for example,
Sure.
that would take a little longer because you've got to retrain learning skills. But from the emotional, even then, so you train people, the community gets involved,
Right.
and then the person takes responsibility in community. Because the other thing is this nation's over therapeutized, that people have got so, and I mentioned that this morning too, is that I totally believe in the counseling system, and totally, but we've got to be careful where there's almost like a line sometimes being crossed. I don't know if you found that.
Oh, yeah.
Where the therapist is almost fixing their own problems by fixing other people.
Yes.
Yep.
So, and coaching, everyone's got a coach, coaching, but it's a person's need. The coach is very often meeting their own need and creating this dependency. And we can't be dependent. We have to be supportive.
Well, we also
It's a
tell
weird version of that wounded healer.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
also tell our patients a lot of times too, like after 3 sessions, I don't know if you need a counselor. Like you need a friend, or you need a
There you
pastor,
go.
or you need a coach, or a mentor, and we try to get them connected with
Someone
that.
to talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
That's
don't
where
need to
the
pay me $100
I-
a month or $100 a session. You go and find somebody that you can do
Yeah.
life with.
Exactly.
An
I would-
unpaid friend.
Paid friend.
There you go. I'd love to see more invested in that, more
Yeah.
dollars being placed into research, dollars being placed into setting up community centers. I mean,
Yes.
millions that they've just released another huge amount of money to find the neurobiological correlates of depression. It's not
good
that.
luck. I mean,
it's
it's
exactly.
not there.
It's just that, we've got
Yeah.
kids shooting each other. We need to actually start having a situation where we notice and listen and
So can you talk us through those 3 steps as we finish up of what are the 3 things that you think, you've talked about of just how we can make this practical.
Okay, so what I have done in my clinical research over 30 years is try to see how we can embrace and process and reconceptualize. You'll hear me say those words a lot. So the first principle is we've got to embrace, and that means we've got to give ourselves permission to do the crying. The depression is
Right.
okay. We all feel depressed. We all feel anxious. We all feel sad. We all can have psychotic breaks to varying degrees.
Sure.
And these are not illnesses. These are emotional warning signals that something's going on. So by embracing those and giving ourselves permission to experience them and process them, we can then start digging down to find out, why we're doing that, so we can learn to manage it.
Right.
Not eliminate. You are eliminating to a sense, but you're reconceptualizing. So you're eliminating the cause in terms of reconceptualizing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to spend the rest of your life managing an anxiety. And we need to tell people that too, because with our happiness industry and our happiness culture,
Toxic positivity.
exactly, the positive. Don't even get me started down that road. It's created a band-aid. It's a total band-aid
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah.
So people think they can extrinsically fix, get something, put it in. Churches like that too.
Yep.
The scriptures, put it in and it's going to fix you. So that's not. You've got to go through the pain of embracing. You've got to go through the pain of processing, and you've got to go through the pain of reconceptualizing. And my research has shown you do that basically in 5 different steps. And I've got apps and books, and they're called the Switch app.
And
You
we'll
can put in the
actually
show
promote all
notes.
that on the podcast. Or
Yeah,
on
we'll
the-
have it in the description below.
descriptions.
So if you're interested, go there.
So essentially, that's what you as a person need to do. You need to recognize you've got to give yourself permission to experience, process, reconceptualize. It's going to be painful. It's going to take time. I don't know how long.
Sure.
Your body will experience physical effects because your mind and your brain are not the same. Your mind works through your brain and your body responds. So we do damage ourselves physically. 75 to 95% of illnesses come from these preventable lifestyle illnesses. The cancers, all these things are coming from our lifestyle choices. So when I talk about embracing and processing, what we're doing is we're using our physical illnesses and as warning signals. We're using our emotional signals as warning signals to see, hey, something's going on, I've got to do the work. As I'm doing the work, I can't do it alone. And that's where we've got to now connect with community. And how do we connect? We start with ourselves looking outwards and noticing. Are we noticing people in our community, in our immediate family and around us where we work, etc., etc.? Are we noticing people that are in need? Because everyone's in need. So part of our lifestyle should be noticing others and then noticing enough to listen And listening is not listening where you've got your story going through your head and thinking, I can't wait to jump in and say what I've got to say. It's really forgetting about yourself and completely tuning in. And then it is working on a solution together. And that's something that you need to do. That's how you as a person connect with community. And you need that too. You need to be noticed, listened to, and people to help you through a solution. So every human on the planet needs to embrace, process, and reconceptualize, work on themselves, self-awareness, not self-help. And every single person needs to notice and listen and problem solve together. And then, so that's what every human can do. The professionals in mental health, so that's your psychologists, your counselors, etc., are the ones that help us to kind of pull it together, because sometimes we do need the few sessions of our one-on-one with each other. So the licensed professional counselors and psychologists like yourselves are there to help us kind of give that boost, the catalyst to kind of, and I also see you guys as also overseeing thousands of teams of people getting out there and doing the noticing, the listening, and the problem solving.
I always tell people that I want to work myself out of a job, because I would love to have the community do this. Like
the community, and then you oversee the community. And it's you guys that should be overseeing the medical professionals, because what we need to do is we need to have the medical professionals doing what medical professionals do well, which is dealing with the side effects of mental trauma and mind issues, which is 75 to 90%, because only 5% are genetically determined. Illnesses are only, I keep saying it because it's so powerful. 95% of illnesses, including your cancers, your autoimmune, your IBD, all that stuff, your liver disease, all these things, these come from lifestyle, which is how you think, feel, choose, exercise, sleep, etc. So we need that needs medical management as well as mind management. So we're needing we're needing this 95% mind management, and we're needing the 5% biological. So we've got to have our doctors, but our doctors should stick with medicine, not mind. They're not trained in mind. Our psychiatrists should be dealing with the side effects of trauma, medically, not mind. And we should have our psychologists, counselors dealing with mind. Does that make sense?
Well, we're turning it on side of its head, upside down. We should be in charge of the medical profession. I like that.
Yeah, because it's very much the opposite.
I totally agree. Community. I see a community being you guys running. And then underneath that, you've got teams of the medical professionals, the nurses. You've got care centers where you've got homes where people that are broken can go and be loved, not police collecting them, and it's emergency homes where there's just love and support and whatever.
Well, and I see what you're talking about as holistic care and focused on the person.
Holistic care, and the person's very involved. And the person's respected and honored. Then nothing is forced on them. There's no forced treatments. It's forced. It's collaborative between the professionals. And when I was trained, that was what we did. We collaborated. All of us professionals handled and the patient was involved in their care. And that was in the 80s. By the mid-90s, it had changed dramatically.
Well, that's why I look for a lot of my research I look at from overseas, because I don't trust the research coming out of the United States.
You have to literally go back to the 70s and 80s, which is where it's going back to, like the Soteria Project and the open dialogue therapy and bench therapy is going back to what was done in the 70s and 80s.
Well, Trevor, we could talk for hours on this kind of stuff, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk. But we'll definitely put stuff up on the YouTube channel and the website, linking to the app and to the books. But we appreciate you being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for what you do, and I'm very glad that we're collaborating. It's a team effort.
It'd be fun.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are so glad that you are here today, and we hope that if something came up for you that piqued your interest or that you have more questions about, you feel the freedom to call Mayfield Counseling Centers. We're not just here for people in Colorado Springs. We want to help everybody we can. So if you have any questions, email us at candid@mayfieldcounseling.com, or you can check out our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page, where we post resources on a pretty consistent basis. We'd love to help you in whatever we can. Feel free to reach out.